Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the CURT Class 1 trailer hitch receiver on a 2024 Toyota Camry. Camrys are some of the best, most reliable sedans you can find out on the road, but when it comes to maybe doing some explorations or adding to your adventures, maybe it's not the most suited, but that's not to stop you from being able to have a bike rack, cargo carrier, or even towing a small trailer with it. Your other options include having a roof rack on your vehicle to be able to put that cargo rack or a bike rack, and that's not a bad option. I've gone that route on my car, and then I finally ended up going with an 1.25" hitch. And that was all that was available for my vehicle, and that's kind of the case with this. But not to worry, it's really nice to have that hitch because I've used it for many different things, not just my bike rack. So having that potential for a little bit of added real estate makes for a great reason to get a hitch installed on your Camry. Now, taking a look at this one, it is a hidden cross tube. So the great part is it doesn't look like a big clunky hitch underneath your vehicle because a good majority of it's hidden underneath the fascia, leaving only the receiver tube opening and the safety chain loops visible. Now, being that it is an 1.25" means that you're going to be a little bit limited when it comes to those cargo carrier bike racks or any accessory that you may be loading into your hitch, but there's still plenty of options out there. And all of them are going to stay in place using a 1/2" pin and clip. Now, keep in mind, this does not come with the hitch. A lot of times when you pick up an accessory, they'll have them included. If you plan on leaving your accessory on the back of your vehicle long term, I suggest getting a locking pin and clip. That way you can lock this in place and know that no one's going to just walk by and grab those accessories and take them with them. Rolled style safety chain loop is nice and open, so if you are planning to pull a small trailer, you can hook up your safety cables no problem, whether it be a standard S-hook or even a larger clevis style. There's plenty of space to be able to do that. And speaking of towing, you're going to want to adhere to the weight capacities of this hitch. As far as your gross trailer weight rating, it's going to come in at 2,000 pounds, which is going to be the weight of the trailer plus the accessories loaded onto it. Now, a tongue weight rating is going to be more important for your bike racks and cargo carriers, and that's going to be the downward pressure that's on the inside of the receiver tube opening, so really any suspended accessory. And that one comes in at 200 pounds, which is pretty standard for a Class 1, but that's still going to allow you to get a 2-bike bike rack, and you can load those bikes up, or even a cargo carrier, you can load that up. Just make sure you stay under that weight capacity. And as far as pulling a trailer, you do want to check the vehicle's owner's manual to see what it's capable of towing, and then compare that with the hitch numbers as well as any components that you'll be using. Take the lowest number, and that way you stay safe. Now, some of those bike racks and cargo carriers will stow in a vertical position, and you want to make sure that you're able to actually use that function. So measuring from the center of our hitch pin hole to the furthest point of our fascia, it's coming in at 2 inches. So I really don't worry too much that you're going to have any issues with those being able to stow. Now, keep in mind, it may block your reverse camera on this, but that's kind of the nature of having some of those accessories, and you can always drop them down when you have them loaded up, and that might help a little bit. As far as ground clearance goes, it's fairly low. Obviously, it's a small passenger vehicle, so this one coming in at 10 inches. I don't worry about the hitch ever bottoming out, but when you have those accessories loaded up, just know that it extends the length of the car. So as you go up an incline or go over any big bumps, they have the potential to bottom out. So just keep that in mind when you have them loaded up. And also with that measurement, if you do plan on pulling a small trailer, you can determine the rise or drop necessary for your ball mount by measuring the coupler of your trailer, taking this measurement, and then finding the difference, and then you can determine that rise or drop. Now, as far as the installation goes, this one isn't terribly hard to do, but there is some nuances with it, including lowering down the exhaust, trimming heat shields, trimming an underbody panel, and then to get the hardware in place, you do need to enlarge the hole. So you're going to be drilling a little bit of metal just to enlarge that. So if you don't have the tools, the place, or the want to do this hitch install by yourself, then you can use eTrailer's dealer locator, and that way you can find someone close by to you to get this installed for you. But if you're fairly handy and you want to do it yourself, follow along. I'll walk you through all the steps to make sure you get your hitch installed. So let's take a look. To begin our installation, we're going to be lowering down our exhaust, and we want to make sure that we're supporting it. So you can use a box, a block of wood, or really anything that you have to keep this from just hanging down. There is a brace further up, so it's not super crucial, but also you don't want all that weight on your exhaust just kind of hanging down. So since we're on a lift, I'm using a cam buckle strap here to kind of cradle it. And there's going to be isolators that we need to pop off, and they're fairly easy to do. Something that you might want to do is spray them down with a little bit of soapy water solution. Sometimes those isolators can get pretty stuck. So we have this one right by our exhaust tips. I'll just kind of spray this down. And then with a pry bar or a long flathead screwdriver, you can use that brace to kind of pry this off. We also have one on the back side. It's the same thing. Just kind of use the hanger as leverage. And you can pop it off from the top or bottom, it doesn't matter. And then we also have this one here that will pop off as well. If you need to, the exhaust will be loose enough for you to kind of move this. And you can see we have this cradling it down. We're going to be removing our heat shield right underneath where the muffler was, and so you'll see that there's going to be two 10mm nuts that are holding that on. We'll go ahead and get these removed. And we're going to be modifying our heat shield, so we'll just pull this aside for now. And before we trim that heat shield, we're also going to want to remove this underbody panel, and we'll be modifying that as well. So that way we can get all of our trimming done at once. To get this removed, pretty easy. Just some plastic push pins that are going to be located on the bottom portion. It does kind of go all the way to the side here, so we'll get those removed first. And pretty easy to do. You can use a trim panel tool like I have here, or a flathead screwdriver. And you'll see that there's slots. You just pop that screwdriver or trim panel tool in the center, get this portion to pull out, and then you can generally remove the whole thing. If it does separate, just make sure you have both of the pieces. And just with the nuts of the heat shield as well as all the stuff we'll be taking off here, highly recommend having a nice organized spot to keep all of this. It'll make reinstallation that much easier. There's also going to be some plastic nuts that just kind of go onto the studs. You'll see that there's some 10mm ones. There's also some 12mm ones. And these ones, they kind of just spin on the studs if you're using power tools. So what I recommend doing is putting a little bit of pressure behind it as you loosen it. And the cap may come off. If that's the case, just obviously hold on to it. We also have a 10mm bolt that's going to be located kind of tucked up here on the frame rail, so make sure you get that as well. The heat shield, as we have this kind of in place of how it was underneath the vehicle, we do need access to the frame rail for our hardware, so we're going to be trimming a section out here. We are going to leave this stud, that way we can bolt it back in place. And this is pretty thin. I'm using just a pair of snips here that go through this pretty easily. But really, any cutting method that you have, it doesn't take much to cut through this. So just be careful. This gets razor sharp as you cut. So you might want to grab some gloves and just take your time here. And the instructions will kind of give you a diagram. Unfortunately, they're in black and white. It's kind of hard to see. So 4.5 inches is the measurement they give us. The main thing is it's just kind of, it goes up to right about this bump here, so cut that out accordingly. Now we're going to hang tight, looking through the instructions and just kind of working ahead. I've realized that we're going to need to enlarge a hole on the frame. So we'll wait on the heat shield, and also we're going to wait on the underbody panel, because a lot of times they'll tell you to trim stuff out and you don't need to do that. So we're going to try to make sure we only trim off what we need. The best way to do that is wait until the hitch is installed, and then we can trim accordingly. But while back under, we do have this exhaust isolator hanger. We're going to pull this off. If you have dual exhaust, you're going to want to take off both of them. They become a mounting point for the hitch. And this is just going to be a 12mm socket to get these taken down. So go ahead, get those removed. Now we do need to enlarge our frame rail to get our hardware in place using a reverse fish wire technique, but in order to get that hardware to pass up, we'll take off this rubber isolator, and we're going to be using a step bit to enlarge this. And what I recommend doing is having your hardware handy. That way you can determine exactly how large you need to go here. This is definitely where it comes in play of having that exhaust lowered down, because it is going to be a little bit tight here with a standard drill. But I recommend grabbing your carriage bolt and spacer block, because That way you can really see exactly how large you need to get. You're going to go large enough to get this in place. So if you really wanted to, you could take this and kind of trace around it and then enlarge to that size. But we'll go ahead, we'll get our safety glasses on and start drilling this out. We're going to be doing that on both sides of the vehicle. Now our step bit is a great way to enlarge the entire hole, but something else that you can do, if you're limited on what tools you have, is I can make a notch across here to drop this in. And that's really all we need to do is make sure that it's going to be wide enough for this and the spacer block to go through. So with a Dremel, if you just kind of notch each end, a lot of times if you have a large enough wheel, you just run it across. And that's a great way also to get this in place. Now something I'll recommend is once you enlarge that hole, you're going to have raw exposed metal. We want to make sure that long term that doesn't turn to rust or corrosion. So a little bit of spray paint on those raw edges is going to help prevent that. So you can use really any color you have, clear coat, black, whatever. The main thing is you're coating that up, and our hitch is going to hide all of that. So once you have that drilled out large enough for this to go in place, it's going to be pretty easy. We'll take our coiled end and our spacer block, we're just going to slide that over. We can hold on to that. And then our carriage bolt just threaded onto there. And then we'll feed this in. Same with our spacer block. And then we'll just pull this down. We're going to leave our pull wire on here. It's going to make it easier when we slide our hitch up to keep that from going up into the frame rail. So we'll just go ahead and repeat the same process on the other side. Now depending on your vehicle, if you have dual exhaust, you're going to remove that other exhaust hanger. But since we only have a single outlet, we have these plastic caps, which is really nice of Toyota to do that. It kind of prevents any rust or corrosion buildup in the weld nuts. So these, we're not going to be reusing them, so just kind of pry these out. So with those bolts passed through, we're about ready to get our hitch up, but before we do that, go ahead and we're going to grab our heat shield that we trimmed out, and I just kind of rolled the edges here to kind of take some of that sharp away. This will just go back in place. And then we're going to tighten these down with that 10 millimeter. Now's a good time to go grab someone for an extra set of hands to get your hitch raised up. But I also noticed that there's this plastic, the fascia, that it attaches to this tab here. So if you have this, go ahead and remove that, because once our hitch is installed, it's going to live kind of on the back side of our fascia. So we want to make sure we have access to be able to slide it up into place. Now this is going to be a lot easier with an extra set of hands, and we're going to get this hitch up. Make sure that you have your serrated flange nut ready on each side. Our goal is to get these started just a little bit on each side to hold the hitch up. So take your pull wire, feed it through the forwardmost hole here, and as we kind of get to the point on the fascia, just kind of peel this back. And that's going to sit up there, and align that bolt, the carriage bolt that we passed down through here. And if you can, sometimes you can use the hitch to kind of wedge it against there. The main thing is you're not pushing this back up in the frame rail, and we'll just get this started, just a few threads on each side. So with this supported with those bolts in place, we'll go ahead and grab our new hardware. There should be 4 of these. And where the exhaust hanger is on the one side, obviously we didn't have the dual exhaust here, but this is going to thread into those weld nuts. And on the other side, it's going to be the same, but we want to make sure that we get our exhaust hanger back in place. So we'll get this one started here. The exhaust side, as I mentioned, make sure you get your hanger in place, and then we'll pass this up. So it should align obviously with the exhaust hanger, so just make sure you have it in that proper spot. And sometimes you may need to adjust the hitch a little bit to get it to all align, so just make sure it's threading in. Should go in by hand fairly easily here. Now we have all of our hardware in place, we're going to snug this down. Our larger carriage bolt, that's going to be a 19 millimeter socket to get this snugged down. And we're going to be coming back with a torque wrench, so you don't need to get crazy here. We're just making sure that we have it snugged up. And then our exhaust hanger bolts, or the bolts that go in at the angle, those are going to be a 13 millimeter socket to accomplish that. And we'll do this on the other side as well. Using a torque wrench is going to be really important here because when you use weld nuts, a lot of times you want to make sure it's snug enough, obviously, so we can use our hitch, but also if you go too tight, you can actually destroy those welded on portions. So making sure that we're tightening them down perfectly is going to be key, and that's where the torque wrench comes into play. A lot of times you can go to an auto parts store and rent one for free, but we'll go through, we'll get these all torqued down, change our torque settings for the other hardware, and get those as well. Our hitch is officially installed, but we still have a few more things we need to do. So let's get our exhaust put back in the isolators, and then we can worry about that underbody panel and trimming. We'll take our underbody panel and we're going to just mock this up. So try to get everything aligned as far as those studs on the plastic, and that's really going to give us a good indicator exactly where we need to cut. The instructions have you cut the entire length. I don't think you need to do that. We really just need to account for the receiver opening here. So with a paint marker, just mark this out of where you're going to trim. We just want this clean so it'll go back right around this area, but still attached to all the rest of the points. So pretty easy. It actually is going to slide behind the safety chain loop. So I think as far as cutting goes, you'll see that this kind of aligns with it, this little corrugation here. So I'm just going to mark this out, and it goes back, I'd say about here. So we'll just kind of get this section cut out. We can always cut out a little bit more if we need to. And as we kind of mock this up, you'll definitely see where you need to trim a little bit more. And once you got it cut out, just knock off any of the burrs that you have. This is just kind of give it that nice finishing touch. You can also use a file here. So with that trimmed out, we'll go ahead and get this underbody panel put back in place. And that was a look at installation of the CURT Class 1 trailer hitch receiver on a 2024 Toyota Camry.